This week on Fight Night, Dave Milhouse and Dan Levi break down UFC 258 and tell you everything you need to know about the bets on Green vs. Miller, Barber vs. Grasso, and the main event, Usman vs. Burns, and so much more coming up right now.
Hello and welcome to Line Snipers Fight Night. I'm your host, Dave Milhouse. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Milhouse. And with me today, I have Dan Levi, bestfightpicks.com. You can find him on Twitter at bestfightpicks. He's also the host of the Half the Battle podcast. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Dave. How's it going?
Couldn't be any better over here. It's real cold, but that just gives me more time to sit inside, study some fights, make a little money. So
where are you at?
Works
where are you
for
at?
Me. I'm in Winnipeg, so I think minus 35 Celsius today we're talking. I'm not even exaggerating that. It's a little bit messed up.
Yeah, no complaints over here. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, as you can see with the Braves hat and the Falcons shirt. I mean, I got to represent. I know we're talking UFC today, which I'm very excited about. And I was going to complain that it's starting to get a little bit colder here in Atlanta, but after you told me Winnipeg, I'm going to keep my lips sealed, my friend.
Right on. Yeah, there's not much to complain about when we talk about Winnipeg versus Atlanta for weather. But let's get right into this. We have a pretty good main card here. We're going to start with the main event, Kamaru Usman, Gilbert Burns. Do you want me to tee this off or do you want to take it away?
You're the host, my man. It's all you, buddy.
Okay. Well, the way I see this is pretty one-sided for Usman. So I'll just start there and now I'll explain why. Size-wise, we know Gilbert has spent a lot of time at lightweight. He's moved up to welterweight. He looks a little undersized for my liking, though, at welterweight, whereas Usman's actually a pretty decent-sized welterweight. He's got 5 inches of reach on Gilbert Burns, as well as just a thicker frame. So I expect him to be stronger, more powerful fighter here. But if we look at the stat line, we go through the UFC careers. I mean, we're talking quite the difference. I actually am surprised how much better of a striker Usman has been. Usman is plus 2.27 on his strike differential, where Burns is only plus 0.41. If we look at accuracy versus the expected, which is a metric I like to use, basically an average UFC fighter lands 50%, gets hit with 50%, so that would be the expected. Usman is plus 11% on accuracy versus expected, where Burns is only plus 2%, so he's barely outlanding his opponents. If we look at the takedown, the grappling game here, Usman's landing a 47% clip, and Burns is giving up a 50% clip. And just right there, I'm very confident that Usman's going to have his way grappling with Burns. Of course, these guys train together. They know each other's tricks. But I actually think that leans, if anything, a slight advantage to the better fighter, who's Usman, who won't be surprised by anything Burns tries to pull out of his bag here. So now we basically just have to look at the strength of schedule. Where did these stats come from? And when I look it over, all I see is Usman fighting better fighters. So not only has he put up the better numbers, he's done it against a better strength of schedule, which is more impressive to me. Burns would just be an average fighter on Usman's schedule, whereas Usman is head and shoulders above anything Burns has ever faced, and therefore a below average spot for reaching the, his average stats. So I think this line should be more like minus 400. And I guess I'll leave it at that. Why don't you give me your take on this main event?
Well, you bring up some good points. I do agree with Usman being favored here. I'm not going to bring up the size because I actually truly believe that Gilbert Durinho is a new man at 170 pounds. I think this is his right weight class. He was, he missed weight a couple times at 55. It was clear that he was cutting too much weight and he was compromising himself to make that weight. I mean, you remember in some of these fights that went past round one, the striking defense wasn't as good with Gilbert Durinho. The gas tank was in question. So now that he's moved up to 170 pounds, I feel like we're seeing the best version of him possible. And maybe there's a chance he is good enough to be the champion. However, for him to come out here and defeat Usman, it's going to come down to him catching Usman, whether it's with a big shot, whether it's with a takedown to a back take. Usman has been submitted before. However, it was, 8 years ago. A lot of stuff has gone down between now and 8 years ago, my friends. So, if you're going to bring up Usman losing via submission in 2013, then we got to bring up some of Burns' losses at 155 pounds. But the biggest thing for me here is the difference in the pace. And you brought up some numbers. Now it's my turn to bring up some numbers. I mean, Kamaru Usman against Rafael dos Anjos landed 130 strikes. Against Tyron Woodley, 140 strikes. Against Colby Covington, 175 strikes. Against Jorge Masvidal, 94 strikes. The most strikes that Gilbert Burns has ever landed in a fight is his most recent fight against Tyron Woodley, where he landed 83 strikes. So basically what I'm telling you is that Kamaru Usman doubles up Gilbert Durinho on output. So that leads me to believe in order for Gilbert to win this fight, it's got to be inside the distance. However, if you want to make the case for Gilbert Durinho winning a decision, what would have to happen is he'd have to have these big fight moments, whether it's him dropping him, wobbling him, getting a takedown or two, taking the back, doing stuff like that to sway the judges. Because if it just comes down to output, Kamaru's winning this all day.
Yeah, fully agree with you there. And a lot has changed in 8 years since he did get submitted. Kamaru's never even given up a takedown. He's got 100% takedown defense. So I agree. He has to be wobbled and compromised in some way in order for Burns to even just start teeing off on him and get that strike count up, or to put him in a bad enough position to win it. So very much on the same page there. To me, it sounds like you like Usman, but do you feel the value is on Usman?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you look at it currently, a lot of action's been coming in on Burns. It seemed to me yesterday that Usman was about to hit 300, and now he's coming back down. I see some minus 250s, even a minus 240. So, yeah, I do think the value is on Usman, unless you're just convinced that Gilbert Durinho, his current form is the best welterweight on planet Earth. And I think he's a top 5 guy, but top 5 and championship and being a champ are two completely different things. And you got to distinguish between the two. And that's why it might sound like I'm being kind of critical of Burns when I talk about his striking defense or the pace, but I'm not. I've got all the respect in the world for him. It's just that when we're talking about being a champion, you have to list all these factors, or else you're not giving the whole story. So yeah, I got to go with the pace of Usman here, man.
Yeah, 100% with you there. All right, let's move on to the co-main event. Maycee Barber, Alexa Grasso. This is another one I have a fairly strong opinion on. How about you take this one away and I add to what you have?
Sure. So I think the dynamic of this fight is kind of similar to a fight that happened not too long ago between Jessica Andrade and Caitlin Chookagian, where Chookagian is kind of known for the straight punches and the output, kind of like Grasso is, whereas Barber is known for that power and just, being kind of a brute, kind of like Andrade was. And in that specific fight, we saw Andrade go out there, win by first round knockout. Now, granted, these aren't two top 5 fighters we're dealing with. These are two top 10 fighters, a little bit different. Like we talked about the calibers, it makes a world of difference. So I think both bring unique problems to the table. I think that Alexa Grasso has very good hands for that weight class's standards. She's fast, and she's experienced. She's fought high-level competition at this point. With Maycee Barber, what's so unique about her is that when's the last time you saw a girl in any weight class win 3 fights in a row by knockout in the UFC? I doubt you can name one off the top of your head. I mean, maybe Amanda Nunes. I'd have to look it up. But the reality here is that we don't often see girls going out there and knocking people out. And if we're talking about any of the guys' divisions, I do tend to favor straight punches over loopy punches because the straight punches get there quicker, as you know that. But it's different with the women's divisions, my man. And power goes a long way because these girls aren't used to getting hit by that kind of one-punch knockout power. So when you have someone that comes out there and can drop people and can knock them out in those weight classes, it really stands out. So I think that despite Alexa Grasso having better technique than Maycee Barber, I think Maycee's going to come out here and hit her with some shots that change the course of the fight. I think if she wants to take it to the mat, I think she's got a big edge there. So I see Maycee Barber, actually, I think she should be the favorite. I think there's some value on her at the underdog spot. Listen, I know she cost a lot of people against Roxanne Modafferi, but listen, she was minus 1,000 in that spot. She's an underdog here. These are two completely different spots. I know she rubbed a lot of people the wrong way after taking that loss, and then she's trying to get on the microphone. She was doing a bunch of cringy stuff. But listen, man, we all make mistakes. It's been a year since then. She's a 22 or 23-year-old kid. I mean, I don't even want to name all the kind of dumbass stuff I was doing when I was that age. So, You know, we all do embarrassing stuff at that age. I think we can give her a pass. I think she comes out here with a year extra of maturity, seasoning, comes out here, puts that power on Alexa Grasso and wins this fight. So I'm going with the underdog, Maycee Barber.
Okay, right on. See, I tend to differ a little bit here. I think Grasso should be the favorite. I see she has faster hands, crisper technique. Obviously, we just discussed that, and I agree power does count for a lot. But I think she has actually quite good power, and the reason she's not dropping girls like flies is because she's fighting really good competition. The one thing with Maycee Barber is she hangs her chin up a little high for my liking. Her striking defense kind of sucks. It's 51%, so 49% are getting through, and we're talking about not exactly great fighters doing that to her. Jillian Robertson is one of the worst strikers that we'll find that's like ranked pretty high. Roxy's not very good. JJ Aldrich, not very good. Okay. Hannah Cyphers. These people all had really tough rounds with Maycee. Round one could have went either way in just about every fight except for Jillian's. And we know what kind of beating Roxy put on her. I know she hurt her knee, but I haven't been as impressed with her and until she pulls away in these fights. Now, it's always close until it's not, and that's where that power comes in. But I do think Grasso can take it. For some reason, I just feel like she can take it. When I'm looking at the strength of schedule that Grasso has fought, there's some pretty good names on here. She did lose to Carla Esparza, but that third round was crazy. She beat the crap out of Carla in that round. She almost knocked her out. I thought she was about to get the finish on the feet. She had her in an arm bar that was so deep I almost puked. That finishes 95% of the roster right there. And had she won that fight, I think she would be pacing on to bigger and better things. But of course, now we have a year off for Maycee. That's a lot of time to get better, especially when you're that young and developing. So it's really hard to say exactly how much better Maycee will be. So I'm not super excited about saying I like Grasso in this fight, but I do think she's slightly better. Where I did find some value is in the prop section. So odds makers have it more likely that Maycee knocks Grasso out than they do her win by a decision. And I think that's incorrect. I do agree she has the power, but I think knocking out Alexa Grasso is easier said than done. It's not like knocking out Hannah Cyphers, although I do have respect for Cyphers and think she's underrated. I can't believe she hasn't been cut, but she's always in these fights until she's not. Anyway, I digress. We see Maycee Barber by decision at about plus 350 is the best odds I can find right now. And so that makes her inside the distance around the 275, 260. I think that's at least backwards. I would say that she has a better chance of out-volleying, putting more volume on Grasso and winning by a decision than she does by knockout. And then on the flip side, Grasso inside the distance, I've seen as high as plus 750. And I think that's incorrect too. Maycee really hangs her chin up. We've seen her get Carla Esparza in a wicked armbar, and that's a good wrestler. I think Carla would have no problem with Maycee, especially on the ground. And so Grasso could potentially put her in a bad situation that way or just land some sharp punches. She has good combinations, and they're pretty accurate. I like what I see out of her. So I'm not saying I think that Grasso's going to knock her out or anything, but 750 is way too stretched. And that leaves her at like a pick'em, basically, by decision. And I think that's a little stretch too. You know, there should be decent plus money to be found on Grasso by decision and a lot less on the inside the distance. But yeah, as far as just the money line goes, I think there's a little bit of value on Alexa, but yeah, I'm not saying we have to play it or anything. That would just be my lean. Maycee's got to look a little bit better against weaker competition before I think she can go out there and style on Alexa.
Fair enough.
So, yeah, so a little difference of opinion. It'll be a close fight. It is close odds, so that is what you expect. Yeah, that's no problem. Let's move on to the next fight here. We got Gaslam coming back, Ian Heinisch. I don't really like this fight. Gaslam's just not active enough for my liking. He's fought, well, since he fought Ronald Sosa in 2018, Heinisch wasn't even in the UFC then. Since then, Heinisch has 6 fights, and we have 3 for Gaslam. I mean, that's just not enough action. Now, albeit it's against great competition, fighting Israel Adesanya, Darren Till, Jack Hermanson was able to heel hook him real early. Those are tough fights. They are tough fights. This fight with Till was very close, very good. He had a good account of himself with Adesanya. That's a kind of strength of schedule that Ian Heinisch has never seen. And so when we go through the stats and see, yeah, Heinisch has, a better accuracy. Well, no kidding. I mean, fighting Omari Akhmedov is not like fighting Israel Adesanya. Sample size isn't really big enough for me to feel super comfortable. But I do think he's kind of dangerous. I do think he hits hard. I do think Gastelum has a good chin, however. So I view this as the line is probably correct. If not, a little bit light on Gastelum. Maybe he could be a bigger favorite. But I hate how inactive he is. He just doesn't seem as interested in being a warrior these days. There's something about this fight that rubs me the wrong way. How about you? Why don't you tell me your take on this one?
I mean, I think it should be exciting. Kelvin's usually involved in very exciting fights, and Ian Heinisch fights with a lot of hunger. He fights with a lot of pride. He's one of these guys that you start to slow down on a guy like Ian Heinisch, and he will tee off on you. And he's also got an original style. He's switching his stances a lot. He's got very unorthodox footwork, kind of herky-jerky, but it works for him. So it's really, to me, about where Kelvin's at. I'm not going to write Kelvin off. He's only 29 years old. He's still, in my book, he's still just a kid. It's just about, is he still into this stuff anymore? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it if he's not. I mean, if he's not into this anymore, look, I was in attendance in Atlanta, Georgia when he fought Israel Adesanya, and that was one of the best fights I've ever seen in my life. And he's been in this sport for so long. So it's really about, has he found that reason why he's competing again? And, is he hungry? Is he up for this? Because I think the best version of Kelvin beats Ian Heinisch, and I think he's better everywhere the fight goes. It's just that if he's showing up a little bit disinterested, this ain't the sport for all that. A guy like Ian Heinisch is hungry. He will take advantage of those spots if you show him any kind of weakness whatsoever. But again, Kelvin's only 29. I'm not closing the book on him quite yet at all. And I think he should be favored here. It's just about how much should he be favored. And these last few fights, I know they haven't gone his way, but we got to look at each fight individually. I thought the Izzy fight, all three judges had it 2-2 going into the fifth round. I know the fifth round was a 10-8 or a 10-7, possibly could have been stopped, but he did compete pretty well up until that point. The Till fight, a lot of people didn't like that fight, but the thing is, I don't really care if you liked it or not. To me, it's about the stylistic matchup, and Till fights nothing like Heinisch at all. So I kind of put that fight on the back burner. And then the Hermanson fight, I actually thought Kelvin looked really good. He just got caught with a leg lock early on. I don't expect him to get caught with a leg lock here. So I think it's just a completely different fight. I'm going to lean with Gastelum. I think he's the faster guy. I think he's the more well-rounded guy, and obviously the more experienced guy. But again, if he's not quite as hungry, if he doesn't want this as much, I could see Heinisch edging a close one. But official pick, I got to go with Gastelum.
Yeah, so exactly the same page. He just has this look where it's like he might not care anymore. And I know that can rejuvenate. He's a monster, but anyone that's not, training hard, and I mean, you're being locked in a cage. A guy like Heinisch will kill somebody if they're not prepared. So yeah, that's a really tricky one. It'll be fun to watch, that's for sure. Super fun.
No questions asked.
Let's move on here. Yeah, totally. Jim Miller, Bobby Green. I don't like this fight, especially where the odds are. Jim Miller's dangerous. He can catch you in a submission even if you're not on the ground. But Bobby Green is, a much better striker. He's faster. I even want to say his gas tank might even look a little bit better these days than Miller's. I don't really know what to make of this one, though. Jim Miller fights don't seem to last too long. Bobby Green seems to like to win by points. And I don't know enough about Bobby Green on the ground, so I'm not that comfortable saying I like him at all here. Basically, I have nothing intelligent to say on this fight. Why don't you break down Bobby Green and Jim Miller for the people?
Well, I actually do like Bobby Green in this spot, and I'll tell you why. I think a lot of people might be gun shy because Green might have burnt them the last fight against Thiago Moises, but Jim Miller is not a 24-year-old kid making improvements every single fight like Thiago Moises is. So to me, I don't care if he lost a close decision to a hungry young lion. He doesn't have that here in front of him with Jim Miller. Look, I got all the respect in the world for not just Jim Miller, but Bobby Green as well. You know, when I first started watching this sport, these were two of the guys that were coming up, man. So, and they were initially supposed to fight back in the day. Jim ends up fighting Yancy Medeiros. He chokes him out in the first round. So I think there's a situation where Jim Miller has to do what he's been doing these last few fights, which is when he wins, he gets a first round finish. Because ever since 2016, you know, he got diagnosed with an unfortunate condition. He's got Lyme disease, and it's really impacted his cardio. And that's why when he wins fights, he finishes you in the first round. And when he loses, he tends to get extended. And listen, he's going to give his best ditch effort in that first round. It's going to be very competitive in that first round, but Bobby survives that first round. Bobby's winning the second and third, and he's winning this decision. As far as how he is on the ground, he's pretty damn good on the ground. He's got good wrestling. I mean, I haven't seen Bobby Green submitted in like over a decade, and the only time I saw him get finished was in 2016 against Dustin Poirier in the first round in Los Angeles, California at UFC 199. So it's been a long time since he's been finished in the first round. I got to go with Bobby Green via decision here. I think that he doubles him up on output. And as long as he's not caught in a guillotine, a rear naked choke, something in the early going, he's going to cruise to a unanimous decision here. So I got Bobby Green.
Yeah, Bobby Green should look better as each bit of the fight goes on, without a doubt. Any interest in maybe a Green wins in round 3 plus 1650-ish type line? If Miller does wear out enough, one of these combos could do it.
You know, I'm not a prop guy, man. I think it's tough enough to pick a winner, let alone the actual outcome of the fight, man. So I would just, you know, take the money line on Green, or if you're a parlay guy, throw him in a parlay.
That's fair. Let's scroll down a little bit here. Rodolfo Vieira, Anthony Hernandez. Does this fight, does it last at all? We have a total of 1.5. The juice is coming in on the under. I mean, that sounds about right to me. Basically, we'll make this one short. Is there any chance Hernandez doesn't get submitted in this fight?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a chance. He's got experience against black belts. He beat Brendan Allen in LFA, actually went 5 rounds with him. So he actually came into the UFC with a lot of hype, and I know he hasn't quite lived up to it. I'm not exactly sure why, if it was a case of maybe he needed a little bit more seasoning and experience on the regional scene. Because, I mean, he's only 27 years old. He's just a kid. So I could see him making these improvements. And also, when you beat Brendan Allen on the LFA scene, that's one of those wins that gets you signed. So maybe, you know, I don't want to call it wrong place, wrong time, because it sucks to say that about a win. Like, he went out there and beat Brendan Allen. That means you get signed to the UFC. And on Contender Series, he destroyed Jordan Wright. He absolutely ran through him in 40 seconds. It's just when he's gotten to the UFC, obviously the takedown defense hasn't been the best, but he's been hurt to the body more than once. I'm not even just talking about that Kevin Holland fight. Even the fight that he won against Jong Young Park, he was badly hurt in that first round. Now, on the opposite side with Rodolfo Vieira, he might have the best jiu-jitsu credentials out of anyone on the UFC roster currently. But that being said, he's extremely one-dimensional. However, he is so damn good at that one dimension that it doesn't really matter if he has a disadvantage here, you know, striking or in any other area of the fight. Because it's kind of like one of those things, like if you create a fighter in the video game, you set the jiu-jitsu stats to 100 on Rodolfo Vieira, right? So the striking might be a 30. And you know what I mean? But it doesn't matter because he's going to take you down one time and the fight's going to be over shortly after. So I kind of think that's what happens here. Look, down the line, we can talk about fading Rodolfo when he's fighting, you know, a very credentialed guy with good takedown defense that can absolutely light him up. Because I think that here, even if Anthony Hernandez lands something that hurts him, that hurts Rodolfo standing, that Rodolfo can still mix it up, get this to the mat, and from there, it'll be over. So I think that Rodolfo's advantage on the mat is far superior than Anthony Hernandez's advantage on the feet. So, yeah, I do see it being a first-round submission. But, listen, we've seen so many outcomes in this sport that it's not going to surprise me if, you know, he doesn't get that. Because at the end of the day, in this sport, it's tough to be a one-trick pony and make it work at the highest level. But this is a matchup where he can make it work, so I'll pick him here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems pretty obvious that he should be the favorite. The guy is built like a fire hydrant. He's going to look so much bigger than Hernandez walking in this cage. His striking sucks, but he does pressure. He will get him against the cage and eventually take him down, choke him out, I would imagine. There is a slight chance of him getting knocked out, but if that happens, it's going to happen early. So I was leaning towards the under in this fight. And And Rodolfo inside the distance is just a little too juicy for a prop for me, so not really of any interest there. Let's check out Andre Ewell, Chris Gutierrez. This fight I find very interesting because Andre has, I think, close to an 8-inch reach advantage in this spot. He uses his jab well. He does actually have pretty nice hands. However, when he does throw his jab, he sticks his lead leg way out. It is so stretched, and Chris Gutierrez has some of the nicest leg kicks, definitely in this division by a mile, I would say. I think he chews up Andre's legs and makes this very interesting. I'm not exactly sure where the value is because that reach can really lean itself towards getting ahead on the scorecards. If he just keeps his hands moving, it won't be too hard for Andre to get ahead, but I do believe that he's going to be so worried about these leg kicks after the first 3-4 minutes that really hinders his volume and kind of just paves a path for Chris to win the rounds. Chris is actually a pretty good striker. This guy has barely been hit in some of his wins. He's done a pretty good job avoiding danger, maintaining his distance control very nicely, and really setting up everything off those leg kicks. I'm a big leg kick fan, so maybe I'm geeking out a bit on it, but I think it's huge. For him to beat Vince Morales 60-8 in significant strikes is pretty wild. I honestly thought that would be a lot closer. So other than losing to Ronnie Barcelos or having a really bad round against Cody Durden, which turned it into a draw that he clearly whooped Cody's ass the next 2 rounds, he hasn't looked bad at all to me. He's looked in firm control all but 1 round, and basically that. And your debut against Barcelos that's very hard. So no expectation for him to even look okay there. And you know what? He didn't look horrible to me. So I do like Chris Gutierrez in the spot. I'm still trying to decide if there's enough value to bet it. But I do see him chopping down this tree and at least making this super uncomfortable for anyone backing Andre. What would you say about this one?
I like both guys. Chris Gutierrez definitely cashed for me against Vince Morales, but I was under the impression going into that fight, not just after the fight, going into that fight, that Vince Morales has absolutely zero business in the UFC, and that was easy work. And not to mention, I think the biggest thing that we got to bring up here is the stance. Andre Ewell is a southpaw, which is actually going to make it tougher to get off on the leg kicks, because as you know, for an orthodox fighter to get off on leg kicks against a southpaw, they're kicking right into the shin of the southpaw, right, which oftentimes discourages them. So I think that if anything, Gutierrez might be going to the body more in this fight, might be going upstairs more, might be throwing his hands more. So actually, I think there's a dog or pass situation because of that. I see this being a fight where it goes to the judges' scorecards and it's very close, and it comes down to, do you favor the output of Andre Ewell, or do you favor the power, like the hard shots landed, of Chris Gutierrez? Because I kind of see Andre Ewell doubling him up on strikes landed, but Chris probably lands the harder shots. So it's about, Chris Lee might score that for Gutierrez, but Jaron Villel might disagree and say that Andre Ewell, got the better of it. So I think in a fight like that, I actually think it's a dog or pass situation. So for me, I'm going to go with Andre Ewell here. Again, we haven't seen Gutierrez be effective against a southpaw. We haven't seen him against a southpaw, period. Right. My good friend Cody Durden 10-8'd him in the first round. The strike stats on that first round were 57-3. Next 2 rounds definitely went to Gutierrez, but they were a lot closer than that first round. But again, Cody brings something different to the table than Andre. Cody's a wrestler. Andre's a boxer. If Andre was an orthodox fighter, then I would go with the chop down the tree narrative. But since he's not, it's going to be tougher to get off on the kicks. I think it's a close fight, man. So I'll go with the dog here. I'll go with Ewell via another close decision.
You make a really good point there with the stance. I actually didn't really think of that as I was envisioning his legs getting kicked. That's very interesting. Now I'm going to have to go back and rethink this because I like everything else about Andre Ewell. I actually have him rated a little bit higher than the market usually. I didn't even mind the idea too much. I didn't think he would beat Stamen, but I was kind of looking at the line by decision plus 600-ish is a bit much for a guy with this much reach. So he does have my respect. I'll have to go back and take a look at that one. That's a good point. And if he's not getting chopped down, he will maintain distance. So Very interesting point. Ricky Simone, Brian Kelleher. I like Ricky Simone in this spot. I do think the line might be a little light on Ricky, and that's just because this guy can eat a punch, and he's definitely going to be pressing, pinning Kelleher against the cage and taking him down on repeat. I would imagine Ricky has no trouble landing at least one takedown per round, if not two. And I don't think he's a great striker by any means, but I think he's right around just as good as Brian Kelleher is in the striking realm. So I actually do like Ricky Simone. I think he'll keep himself out of enough danger here and just grind out a decision victory. I don't really have too much else to say on it. Do you have anything for Brian Boom Kelleher or Ricky Simone?
Yeah, I agree. I think that Simone is the better fighter across the board. It's just going to come down to not getting caught. One thing about Kelleher, he's a very opportunistic finisher. He's got power in both hands. He's got a nasty guillotine. He's experienced. I mean, this is a guy that on his regional scene beat Julio Arce twice, went to decision with Jimmy Rivera. So he's already been fighting UFC competition outside the UFC. And with Simone, man, he's extremely tough. He's got great work rate, great output. The only issue with him, he's a little bit on the chinny side. I'm not even just talking about that Uriah Faber knockout. I'm talking about even Anderson Dos Santos knocking him out and choking him out back in the day. So if this hits the scorecards, Ricky Simone is winning this fight. It's just, don't get caught with a big shot. Don't shoot in and get guillotined. And he wins this fight by outworking Kelleher.
Yeah, totally. That guillotine is one thing that makes me a bit nervous, knowing he's going to be sticking his head in it about 7 or 8 times during this fight. But he always seems to pop his way out. He's got good wrestling. I got to assume he does get out. I was looking at the by decision prop. Last I seen it was about plus 110. And I think that's pretty good value on Ricky Simone. However, I think I might actually prefer that over the money line. It's going to be tough for him to finish Kelleher. Yeah, it will be. So I'm not sure how I'm going to play that, but in some way I will be looking at Ricky Simone. And lastly, let's wrap up the show with Jillian Robertson, Miranda Maverick. This is the first one that stood out to me, the first one I prioritized for film study. And I was very surprised that by the end of it, I thought Miranda Maverick should be the favorite. She's built pretty strong. She looks like a thick girl at this weight. She hits hard. Her combinations aren't too bad, but she does throw with some power. Jillian's a horrible striker. So definitely Maverick has the advantage on the feet here, not only with just hitting harder. I think she's more accurate and the output will be higher. Where Jillian is a beast is on the ground. Everyone knows that, but Miranda actually is a pretty good wrestler as well. So is Robertson going to have her way with Maverick and get her to the ground where she needs this? Maybe. I mean, that's the tough part, obviously, but I don't think it'll be that easy. And by then, I do expect Miranda Maverick to be up on the scorecards, which will put her up on the live line. And in which case, if I was going to back Robertson, I'd probably be looking to get her live after she eats about 20 hands. That's just kind of the way my mind's working. So I'm not sure if I am going to play this fight, but I do think there might be some value on Miranda Maverick, and I do think she'll start hot enough to get good value added on the live line for Robertson. What do you make of this one? Is this too much too soon for Maverick?
Not necessarily. I mean, firstly, if you hear Miranda Maverick talk, she's pretty damn brilliant. I was like, God damn, this girl is very, very smart. She's very intelligent. And that kind of stuff translates to your fight IQ, to your decision making in fight. And I think that she's been paying her dues, and she's very strong, like you mentioned. And also, she's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. So it's not like this is, they say it's striker versus grappler, but it's not like it's black belt versus white belt. I mean, this chick's still a brown belt. She can more than hang on the mat. But yeah, obviously she'll want to keep it standing. And I thought that debut, she was getting hit up with a couple shots, but when it was her chance to land her shots, boy, did they make an impact. So we know that if Jillian cannot get that first round sub, that historically speaking, things don't always go her way. Now, I know you could reference that fight against Courtney Casey, but we all know Courtney Casey has, I respect her a lot, but she has some of the worst takedown defense in that division. That's statistically a fact. That's you can't dispute that. So for me, that fight is kind of the exception in terms of, Jillian having success past the first round. This fight, I think we get back to reality, man. I see it, the first round maybe being kind of close, but after that, I think Miranda kind of bust her up a little bit. Maybe a TKO, maybe a decision, but regardless, a Miranda win.
Yeah, all right, we're on the same page there. I'm going to be digging into that a little bit more, and I think I'll probably be putting a little bet on Miranda Maverick where I can see the line moving the opposite way. I'm not sure exactly why everyone likes Jill here. It's going to be tough to get her in the position to get this victory. For me, this is an obvious favorite or pass situation where going into the film study, I thought for sure Jill.
I think it's because, look, Jillian's got the UFC experience. She's been in there with the bigger names. She's fought, the better competition. I guess she's more established in the UFC. And for a lot of people, well, firstly, not only are there a lot of Jillian Robertson fans out there, but also, people want to fade the newcomer. People think that it might be all hype. So that's where, we got to find out if Miranda's the real deal or not. I personally think she is. So up to her to prove it now.
Yeah, totally. All right, right on. Well, let's wrap it up there. This is UFC 258, Line Snipers Fight Night. I'm Dave Milhouse. That's Dan Levi. You can find him at Best Fight Picks, bestfightpicks.com. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next week.